elevating certain classes of voters over others. That when someone applies by absentee ballot, they're disclosing sometimes really private, confidential information, which by the law is not protected. It's not. There's no requirement that these applications remain secure. So we would like to see true reform in the state of Virginia to eliminate lines, to reduce costs, and have a truly no excuse based system by mail and by in-person methods. Thank you.
Chairman Sasson, General Registrar, Fairfax County, support this bill. This does save Fairfax County a significant amount of money. Currently, we have to start our in-person absentee operations 45 days before an election. By reducing that time down to 21 days, we think we'd see about the same amount of traffic that we normally would. However, we wouldn't have to do the staffing, which we do tremendously in the number of satellite locations to accommodate the number of voters in Fairfax County. So for fiscal reason, we support this bill.
Madam Chairman, Tracy Howard, President of the Voter Registrars Association. The association supports this bill, but we do have some concerns. One of the concerns that was brought up was the limiting of the in-person absentee from 45 days, the same time the mail absentee begins, to only 3 weeks prior to the election. Some of our registrars feel very strongly that they should be able to run their in-person absentee within the office from that 45-day point, because you have ballots available, they're ready. You're going to have many ballots that are sent in and marked prior to that 21 days. The other concern is, while for very large localities this would be a money saver, for many small localities this would have fiscal impact. It means bringing in more people. Many of us from very small localities like myself, we don't have a lot of office help. We don't have the machinery to run an extended open voting, in-person early voting. Just some thoughts there. We do support any way to open up absentee to as many people as possible. It's just some things to be concerned with. Thank you.
Bill Jenkins, Sussex County. I am a small locality like many throughout the state. I have not spoke to hardly any registrars that support this bill. It makes us basically have the election of election day and also having to run it for 21 days straight with new staff. It is an incredible burden. And second of all, if I understand from last year, Fairfax County had approximately 115,000 absentee votes. I don't really think the absentee voting process has been restricted in Virginia. Thank you.
Questions for the patron from the committee? Delegate Sickles?
I don't know if it's a question, but isn't this what everybody wants? They want a photo, someone to come in with a photo ID. They recognize the person. It would reduce mail. It reduces the number of days that we force the registrars to be open in localities by 15 days. And if you're really concerned about voter fraud, this is your bill. I mean, this is come in anytime. It's just like Election Day. It's no different than Election Day. All the protections that we've had for Election Day are you're going to have for 3 weeks. So this is a win-win all the way around. I think our elections would be more secure if we could have in-person voting for 3 weeks, just like we do on Election Day.
Have a second to PBI House Bill 1935. All of those in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All of those opposed? No. Okay. Thank you, Delegate Carr. Delegate Sullivan, House Bill 1603.
Morning again, Madam Chair and members of the committee. 1603 deals again with the list of voters who are eligible to vote early absentee. The statute already allows someone who is responsible for the care of an ill or disabled family member who is confined at home to vote early absentee. 1603 merely makes the care of an individual who's ill or disabled it changes family member to individual. In other words, the person who would be eligible under this statute to vote early absentee doesn't have to be a family member of the disabled individual, but just someone who's been either volunteered or more likely hired to care for this individual. The logic of this, I suggest to you, is pretty obvious, that many ill and disabled people are cared for non-family members. I can tell the committee my own personal story. My father requires 24-hour care. My family is not able to provide that, so we have caregivers that take care of my father 24 hours a day. Those individuals, while not related to my father, would then be eligible to vote early absentee because of this change in the law, whereas now they are not. And I would not want the caregiver for my father to be unable to go vote or have to go vote on a Tuesday and leave my father unattended. So this simply changes family member to individual.
Delegate Cole has a question.
Yeah, I think they can already do that because there's already an excuse if you can't get away from work, go vote. I believe that's already a lawful excuse for to be able to vote absentee.
I would defer to Ms. Burris. I'm not sure there's an excuse that says I just can't get away from work. It depends on, you have to be out of your county, you have to be at work for a certain amount of time. But I don't think it's just my boss won't let me go.
Madam Chair, Delegate Sullivan's correct. You have to have been out of the county or the city in which you're entitled to vote, or that you're at work and your commute time is 11 hours out of the 13 that the polls are open.
So
Thank you.
this simply gives someone who is caring for an individual and obviously can't leave because there would literally be risk to that person's life, can't go vote on Tuesday, they'd be able to vote early on a Saturday. I'd suggest it's consistent with the intent of the bill and broadens it slightly to solve a real problem.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak in favor or in opposition to this bill?
Madam Chairman, Tracy Howard, President of the Voter Registrars Association. This bill is very similar to that Delegate Yost that just reported. This is a genuine situation in many of our localities. We've had people come in and say, yes, I'm taking care of this person, but there is no familial relationship there, and it can be very difficult. The city of Radford has an aging population, and we've run into this in person. So we support this bill.
Madam Chairman, Committee, Carol Nagle at the League of Women Voters. This is a very common sense, sensible addition to relieve the burden of somebody not being able to vote.
Question for Meg. Lines 38, item 9, any person who is in the regular and orderly course of his business, profession, or occupation will be at his place of work and commuting to and from his home to his place of work for 11 or more hours. So if someone's working a 12-hour shift, taking care of someone, wouldn't they qualify?
Madam Chair, Delegate Jones, if the 11 hours or if the 12-hour period fell within that 13 hours that the polls are open, yes.
So they could, in fact, invoke the absentee provision here if they had to work 6 to 6, for example. They had a 12-hour shift taking care of his father.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
I want to make sure there is a provision in the law that they can do that currently, if that's the case.
If I might, Madam Chair, I don't want to get into a debate, but I'm not sure that provision that Chairman Jones just cited will cover every every situation that might be out there.
And I would agree with that. I'm not going to, I would agree.
Madam Chairman?
Delegate
Yeah,
Sickles.
we just made a policy decision last year not to pay for overtime, and so we are encouraging our home care workers to, we're not encouraging, have to leave after 40 hours now on the ones we're even paying, 40 hours a week. I think the situation might arise a lot.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to start my explanation of House Bill 2068 by referring to page 3 at the top from lines 123 to 144. You see the procedures that are spelled out for curbside voting, which is available to any voter who's age 65 or older, and the current wording, or physically disabled. And when the reason for my bill was, as I looked at this and the problems on Election Day of either typically having the chief judge go to the poll or go to the curb, or as the code requires, if you've got a machine, you're not only taking that machine out of use, but you're also requiring that 2 people go to the curb with that machine. And there is a stipulation, unless it so depletes the number of people at the poll, you can do it with 1. But obviously, as you read this language, there is concern about the security of the person's vote, the integrity, and that's why you have the backup of personnel besides taking potentially a machine out of operation. So as I looked at this, I was first and foremost concerned about the impact on Election Day of this particular provision of the code. So I requested that absentee ballot requirements mirror exactly what if we allow it for curbside voting, not having to go into the poll, why don't we allow it then for absentee voting, so that the same issues apply, that you are assuming that that person cannot enter the poll, and you are giving them the right to have this particular service that creates a lot of demand and potential backup on the polls on Election Day. Well, as I got the draft from drafting, I realized that this bill got a lot of good things to it besides just what I started out to do. It not only more efficiently uses the personnel and voting machines, but also because of some problems in the code, the way it's written, there are problems with wording, so that this now clearly indicates that people with mental impairments, not just physical disability, are included both in curbside voting and in voting absentee. Again, there are discrepancies in the language where we're still using an old terminology. It also cleans up on conflicting and unnecessary code references. For example, in the definition on lines 69 and 70, it cleans up that reference. On line 123, which still uses physically disabled, and which is technically not defined anywhere, it cleans that up so that it's person with disability, which has been defined on line 69 and 70, and then it also cleans up 2 unnecessary references to that very definition by code reference, which is supposed to be a definition for the entire title on lines 195 and 285. And then also, the bill on lines 195 and 197, it removes an ambiguous standard that to vote absentee, the disability must be such as to render the voter, quote, unable to go in person to the polls on the day of election because of his disability, illness, or pregnancy. Now, rarely, if ever, is such an absolute standard applied. Totally unable. Rather, the standard is reasonably unable, which is the amendment that you will also find in this bill. And then also by applying a consistent standard that anyone who must be allowed to vote outside the poll should be allowed to vote absentee. It also then includes those over age 65. I got too technical.
I'd just like to say, I think you bring up a good point as far as the curbside voting goes. One, I don't think an age should be a factor in whether somebody votes absentee or curbside. It should be solely based on their ability or disability. I know people who are 80 years old that are in better shape than I am. So I agree that just putting in an age in there to trigger, additional services is probably unwarranted and increases cost and complexity. However, that's kind of an argument for and against your bill because, like I said, I don't think we need to have an age. It should just be based on a person's ability or disability.
Madam Chairman, as someone who represents a lot of older people who are not can get to the polls, but they're frail. They have the right now to, when they go there, to get a curbside voting. But talk about a mess for the polls. I mean, we have a very hard. We have long lines. We have you have to go in and get the election judge to come out at the curb, slowing everything down. And then I wish I had a picture to show you, but I have seen people with walkers who feel kind of like you do, Mr. Chairman, about their ability to get around, waiting in lines in a walker. And, they're okay. That's the way they walk. It's I have gone into the polls and said, you have got to come out here and take care of this voter. Slowing everything down, but I think there is an excuse for when you get up and maybe we should change it to 70, maybe 75. We're living longer. Why don't but there's some point where kind of healthy older people need to be accommodated more than we do in our current law. But having said that, if that part is going to kill the bill, someone could offer an amendment to limit it to the other curbside technical correction, as I would call it. But I just want to speak up for our elderly people here who are not bedridden. It is hard on a November morning when it's cold to stand in a line.
Chairman? Thank you. I'm sorry for not understanding the protocol. Again, I would have regarded it, well, there's a technical side of me that says these other changes need to be made, and it would have been an amendment that I would have accepted, although I would have preferred to have the proper extension without having to go through totally unable to show up at the polls.
Delegate Krizak. Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I ask for a line amendment to this? As I'm listening to the debate earlier, I think what I'm trying to do, my objective is to help the elderly, and I think we all know that 65 is really the new 45, and maybe I think 80 would be a better age for this bill. That would be amending lines 46 and 138 and 139 and changing 65 to 80.
Depends on your physical condition. Sometimes I feel,
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly my mom, who's 83, she would say 85. There is nothing in the code that defines elderly, and maybe next year I'll have to try to do that. But there's
Right,
different.
what is your,
So the bill here is entitling a person who's age 80, if you'll take that amendment, or older on the date of the election, for which,
okay, we have a second. No, let's talk about what we're doing here. What line are we changing here?
Madam Chair, we'll be making a change on line 4, on line 46, on line 138 and 139 to strike 65 and insert 80.
Okay, and then we had a second to accept that amendment. All of those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
so if this, what this bill will do is entitle a person who's over 80 on the date of the election for which an absentee ballot is requested to vote absentee. And I think I do have a lot of constituents that are in that age bracket, and I know that they would appreciate very much this ability to do so. And I think it would be, as Delegate Sickles remarked earlier, on election day, you get some cold, snowy days in November even, and it would, if they could vote absentee just for being 80 or over, I know they would appreciate it. And let me tell you, those folks vote. This would be, that would be great, and be a little bit less walkers going in there, including my own parents. Thank you.
I would just say my dad's 86. He plays golf twice a week. I've been going to the polls 31 years, and I see many who are of that age who they view that as their civic duty. They want to get out and participate in the process, and they view it as something that they have always wanted to do. And I'm not in favor of just a age-specific reason for absentee voting.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This bill actually is to add to the excuse for absentee voting the age of 65. No excuse for members of our community, just because, not just age, but age sometimes is a factor when it comes to responding to situations. Sometimes things just happen. I share with you a similar situation, a story. One of my constituents in our district, who now is at the age of 94, in a recent election, historical election back in 2008, Mr. James McNeil experienced on that day a house fire. As he thought about going to